In this session, we're going to do a little bit more planning and we're going to actually start doing some writing, finally. So these are the things you're going to need. You're going to need your realistic fiction planning sheet from the last lesson, all filled in with your character, your setting, your problem, and your solution. You're also going to need some pages from your packet, some blank writing pages. And of course, you're going to need something to write with. Last time, I filled in my realistic fiction planning sheet. My characters' names were Gretchen and Littlebird. The setting was a fort in the backyard. Problem was Gretchen finds a hurt bird and Gretchen picks up Littlebird and gets help was the solution. So that's the outline of my story. Here is one that I got the other day from one of my students. This student has decided to create characters named Lily and Fiji. What a great name. And the setting of this person's story is park on a sunny, and I think they meant to write day here. They might have just forgot the word, but that is a great description. It gives me a picture in my head of a beautiful park on a sunny day, probably even summertime or late spring. And then the problem in this person's story is that Lily was walking Fiji. Oh, there's a clue. Fiji must be a dog. And Lily fell. Well, the solution is that Fiji kisses Lily's boo-boo and makes it better. Oh, this is going to be a great story, and it's going to have a happy ending. I can tell. Those are my favorite ones, the ones with the happy ending. I can't wait to see how this story develops as this person gets going. So as I told you, in this session, we're going to do a little bit more planning first, and then we'll get to some writing. Don't worry. So we did the first step, which is thinking of a pretend character, giving the character a name, imagining a place, and imagining some trouble that the character gets into. We can check that one off. We did that. But now a little bit more planning. Touch and tell. If we could be together in class, we would be telling each other the ideas that we have in our stories. But we can't be together right now. So you can tell your mom or your dad or maybe your grandma or your grandpa, maybe Uncle Ned, whoever it is that takes care of you and is there with you right now while you're watching this video, maybe tell them the story. And as you do it, I want you to touch across the pages. I'm going to put my pages out here. Touch across the pages as you tell them your story. That's the way I actually do my writing. I talk about it first, and then I imagine what it would be like to write it. Some kids like to sketch the pictures first. They like to do their drawings first, and that helps guide their writing. That doesn't work for me. But again, you're the writer, so I want you to do this the way that works for you. If it works for you to grab your pencil and start sketching out ideas in this drawing area, then go ahead and do that. But I'm going to show you what works for me. And you don't even need a pencil at all. You just need your finger, and you kind of run it across the lines, and you imagine what you're going to write on in each area. Not word for word, but just imagine it in the way that you're telling the story. So for instance, my Gretchen story. This is going to be where my introduction goes. I haven't really decided how I'm going to begin my story yet, but I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But this is where my introduction is going to be, my introduction to Gretchen or my introduction to the situation. And I'm going to write on these lines, my introduction. And then on the next page, this is where I'm going to write the beginning of the story. When the problem happens, what is the problem that Gretchen gets into? Maybe this is where she meets Littlebird and finds out that Littlebird is hurt. And then here is the middle of my story. So this is where she's going to be asking herself, what can I do to help this little bird? So as I'm running my fingers across these pages, I'm thinking that I'm going to write sentences about what Gretchen does to think through her problem and try to find a solution. And then finally on my last page, this is where Gretchen is going to solve her problem. The problem is going to be solved, and I'm going to end with a good concluding sentence at the end of my story. So that is how I do my planning. Maybe it's the same way you do your planning. Maybe it's not. But that's okay because we're all different writers. We're all writing different stories, and we all do it in different ways. And it is okay. How to begin. There are so many ways to begin a story. I could write all day long a big long list of the different ways to begin a story. In your packet, you have a page that says Ways to Begin a Story. It looks just like this one. And these are only 3 suggestions or ways that you can begin a story. I'm going to show you how I use each one of these and begin my story 3 different ways, just to give you an idea of how you can take your story and begin your story. Maybe you like one of these ways. Maybe you have your own way. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to show you this first one, describe a setting. Here's an example. Katie went down the stairs. The basement was dark, creepy, and smelled funny. So if I were going to use that idea of describing the setting first as the way to begin my story, this is what it might look like. Gretchen opened her back door and headed for her backyard fort on a warm summer morning. The air smelled like fresh cut grass. See, I didn't even mention anything about Gretchen's personality, what she looks like, or anything like that. I just started with the setting. I decided to mention that it's warm, that it was summer, the smell from the air. I really want to give my reader an idea of what's happening, what it's like. Give them a picture in their mind of what the day was like. So that's one way. Now here's another way I can begin my story. I can begin my story by describing a character. So here's the example that we have. Matt was a boy who was great at sports. Baseball, soccer, football, you name it, Matt could play it. So now if I took that example and I decided to describe my character first, maybe I would write my beginning of my story like this. Gretchen was a sweet girl who loved animals. She never missed a chance to help a stray cat or a lost dog find a good home. So see what I did? I didn't even talk about the setting this time. I talked all about Gretchen. I told you that she was sweet. I told you that she loved animals. And you get the idea that she's very helpful because she wants to help stray cats and lost dogs find homes. So that's another way I can begin my story. It is definitely different from the first way. Neither is right and neither is wrong. It's all up to what I decide. I am the writer of this story, and I can decide how I want to do it. So before I set you loose to write your story, the beginning of your story, I'm going to show you another way to begin your story. Here's another example. Begin with an exciting action. Now, some of you might really like this way. Here's an example. Krista smacked the ball hard and sprinted to first base. Ooh, what a great beginning of a story. That really gives me lots of clues as to what's happening at the beginning of the story. We have a character named Krista. She obviously plays baseball or softball. She hit the ball hard and ran to first base. So that really does give me a picture. Now, what if I use that idea for my Gretchen story? Maybe my Gretchen story could start off like this. Gretchen heard a strange noise in the backyard. Peep, peep, caw! it was coming from the area around her fort. Okay, so now that's a pretty good grabber, isn't it? Because now the reader wants to know, wow, what's that noise? What was making that noise? And the reader wants to know what's going to happen next. So I kind of like that one. I might use that one. I'm not sure yet, though. So many choices on how to begin my story. Let's take a look at how some professionals did it. Six Dinner Sid by Inga Moore. She starts her story off like this. Sid lived at number 1 Aristotle Street. He also lived at number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, and number 6. How about David Shannon's Grow Up David? How did he begin this realistic fiction story? Let's see. David's big brother always said, "No, David." Ooh, I love the way he began. That really makes me want to find out what's going to happen in this story. Here's another one. It's called Nami's Gifts. How did this author start this story? The winter holidays were here at last. Oh, interesting, starting with the setting. How about this one, Alexander and the Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Bad Day by Judith Viorst. I went to sleep with gum in my mouth, and now there's gum in my hair. And when I got out of bed this morning, I tripped on a skateboard, and by mistake, I dropped my sweater in the sink while the water was running, and I could tell it was going to be a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day. Interesting. What will happen next? The Recess Queen. I know we know this book. How did this one begin? Mean Jean was recess queen, and nobody said any different. Nobody swung until Mean Jean swung. Nobody kicked until Mean Jean kicked. Nobody bounced until Mean Jean bounced. Ready to write. Okay, writers, here we go. It's your turn. It's time for you to get out those planning sheets and get out those pencils and get started. Don't worry about that blank page in front of you. You'll fill it up in no time. I want you to think about how to begin your story. That is your assignment today, is write the beginning to your story. Write the first page. Are you going to start with the character? Are you going to start with the setting? Maybe you're going to start with some exciting action. I can't wait to see what you write. Please don't forget to send these to us. Your teachers want to see what you're doing. We want to see these exciting stories, and we want to see what you come up with. So good luck and keep writing.